Hi, welcome to the OrgDev podcast. So, being an organization development practitioner can mean you end up operating in some interesting organizations and systems. But what are the fundamental values of OD and how should they guide how we work? These questions and many more have been worked through by Dr. Justine Chinoperekweyi, who's our esteemed guest who's joined us today all the way from Harare in Zimbabwe. We're absolutely delighted to be joined by a pioneering, prolific and multi-award winning practitioner. Dr. Justine is the CEO and president of the Center for Organization Leadership and Development in Zimbabwe, and also Organization Leadership and Development Network. He describes himself as an OD scholar, practitioner, author, and leadership and governance trainer. And he supports leaders, work groups, and organizations to embrace and manifest whole systems change and transformation. His OD is informed by leading sustainable strategic change and facilitating continuous improvement while improving the human condition. And he works with institutions, including academic and vocational systems in Africa, Asia, and France. He's also led groundbreaking work in defining African OD. And this is really critical work. Much of OD has its roots in Western thinking. So imagine what happens when you combine Kurt Lewin's thinking with Ubuntu. And is also multi-award winning practitioner and has been awarded things such as the Organization Development Journal Reviewer of the Year as well. So welcome, Dr. Justine. We're absolutely delighted to have you join us today.
To kick us off, just tell us a bit about the work that you do and what your roles entail.
Thank you so much. I'm mainly involved in advancing the science, the theory, and the practice of organization development across Africa and globally. And that led me to establish these two institutions, the Center for Organization Leadership and Development and the Organization Leadership and Development Network. The whole idea being to democratize system change through embedding and embracing organization development principles and practices. So my roles therefore include being a consultant and a facilitator, where we support quite a number of organizations in Zimbabwe, across the African continent, and in the Middle East, particularly in Saudi Arabia, where we are helping organizations in designing OD interventions. And currently we are really preoccupied with female leadership development, where we are embedding an OD process in the facilitation of a female leadership development program. I am also involved as a coach and a mentor, where I actually facilitate every week coaching and mentorship program, which is our signature program in organization development. And we are targeting to have about 100 OD practitioners under this certification program by 2025. We are falling short. I think we'll get about 83, but we are quite happy with the people who have come through the program and the impact that they are really pushing in their different organizations. So I'm also involved in research, organization development research, as a scholar practitioner, trying to amplify the OD tools, the OD techniques and approaches, and how they can actually facilitate systems change, whole systems change as it is. So I consider myself to have a mission of supporting individuals, work groups, and organizations to embrace whole system change and transformation. And that's what I do almost every day.
So how does OD shape the way you approach all of those things?
Yeah, that's where my passion and love for OD actually emanated from. The whole idea of elevating humanity and bringing presence to human systems. How do we ensure human flourishing? How do we ensure organizational effectiveness? So when I then look at organization development in shaping and reshaping my approach, I look at the premises of OD, the spirit of inquiry and effective engagement at whatever level, starting from my home with my kids, going into my social groupings at church, and practicing in organizations and making contributions at national level and globally. So in everything that I do, I have to ensure that it's premised on that spirit of informed and intelligent inquiry, asking questions, critical questions, opening up the space for good conversations or generative dialogues, and effectively engaging people so that we co-create interventions together. And that shift from me being an expert, when people look at that profile that Gary read, they'll say, oh, here comes an OD consultant, and he's going to come and give us solutions to our challenges. And I get in there and I suspend the expert mindset and engage with people. So OD is helping me and rewiring my approaches in terms of valuing people, treating people as human beings, and ensuring that we always co-create interventions with everybody without actually judging people and putting myself, giving myself any pride of place. So that understanding of human beings, the human dynamics, and understanding context is very critical in the work I do and my approaches to doing things. And comes up to OD. It's all because of my interaction with OD folks and the research that I'm doing.
It sounds like you have a really accomplished approach to organization development. Just out of interest, like how established is organization development in the regions that you work? So you work in like Zimbabwe and Namibia, places like that. Like how established is OD? Is OD, because for example, in the UK, OD's been around for 70 years, but it's still on the periphery a little bit. It's still not something that you would find in every organization.
I would say it's in the context of Africa. And speaking of Africa at large, OD is not yet really appreciated. Most people, when I get into platforms and I say I'm an OD practitioner, people would say, oh, you are an HR person. And I have to sit them down to say, no, this is not HR. This is totally different from HR. And then explain that there is the HROD, which is the organizational development, which Chris Wally then advocated to say, let's remove the AL out of OD so that we center on whole system thinking and we manifest whole system thinking. So in most of our organizations in this context, people really don't appreciate OD, and we are doing quite a lot of work around publicizing OD and making the imprimatur of OD more visible. And we are quite happy that we are now interacting with CEOs and directors and boards to really bring OD to the mainstream of our organization transformation initiatives. Most people think OD is about change management as well, which we really try by all means to support people to understand that OD is not all about change management, and it's not only about for-profit organizations. So my mission, when I then look at advancing the science and the theory of OD in the African context, is to amplify real OD and get leaders in organizations to appreciate real OD and the complementary role that real OD plays to HR, to strategy, to change management, and the management consultants as well. I've done a bit of work in Afghanistan, and some organizations in Afghanistan just before the Taliban takeover, they really have an appreciation of OD. From my research, I think it's thumbs up to Susan Zaudiva, may her soul rest in peace, and the work that she had done in Afghanistan around amplifying organization development. So we've been supporting the Ministry of Justice, the Attorney General Office team there, and they have an appreciation of what real OD is. In the Middle East, some organizations that we are working with, we still have a long way to go in terms of helping, supporting people to appreciate real OD, and that OD is distinct from HR, it's distinct from change management, and the uniqueness and value of OD need really to manifest in different settings. So I would say we still have a lot of work to do, and most of our programs are therefore centered on helping people to appreciate this real OD and what it can do to organizations and societies.
Because it can be a real shift, can't it, for organizations or a CEO bringing in somebody to work with them as you say, they're expecting you to be the expert and you're putting that to one side and saying, I'm not the expert. How do you help them move through that, change their kind of expectations and mindsets?
Yeah, that has been a real challenge because, when people hear about a consultant, they think of a solution provider. And here comes Justine, and Justine is telling you that I don't have answers to your challenges. And the leaders will be like, so why do we need you here?
He's a doctor in everything. Fix me, Dr. Justine.
Yes, then I'll be like, no, here is a doctor who doesn't know anything, but who wants to walk with you and be with you on a journey of really understanding what needs to be done. So it's a total shift of reframing mindsets and supporting leaders to understand an OD process. And that whole process of supporting leaders to understand an OD process is a challenge because they are used to expert consulting. They are used to people coming and providing solutions. So we go through the OD map as published by Ted Shuley in terms of starting with that exploratory dialogue. And in that exploratory dialogue, we build a social contract that says, this is my approach to doing things. I put value on the process owners. I put value on people in your organization. And I'm not the primary change agent, because I've been in situations where consultants will say, it's because of me that this organization is where it is. And I'm like, wait a minute. You as an individual can't really support an organization through transformation. Organizations are so complex to be supported by an individual, no matter how many PhDs or research papers we have published. But if you leverage on the process owners and you co-create interventions with people in the system, we get to manifest more value. So I always tell the colleagues that I work with to say our role is to support senior leaders to engage their stakeholders in meaningful inquiries, not for us to provide solutions. So we start from that social contract of agreeing with the leaders to say, this is the approach that we are going to use, and we are going to be leveraging on people in your system. Our role is a facilitative role, and we need solutions from your people. And it has worked amazingly well in the institutions that we've worked with. And even when we are doing short facilitation programs, that understanding is critical. So that is a shift that we are really pushing in organizations that we are working with, to say a consultant is not an expert. A consultant does not come with solutions. Solutions are within your system, and let's co-create. Let's create safe spaces and brave spaces for people to manifest their value. And eventually, I'll be sitting at the back and your team will be doing the work, and you have to pay me for that.
One of the things, and we really do want to signpost people to your, for example, your LinkedIn profile, because you can see just the extensive research and publications that you produce. But obviously, one of the things that sort of caught our eye when we're looking is the work you're looking at in terms of sort of defining OD in Africa. And you do some really interesting work in terms of sessions, and the fact that OD has predominantly come from Western society. So it has a Western looking at things. And you're encouraging people to think about how do you meld that with African wisdom and indigenous knowledge and that as well. And you talk about Ubuntu. How does that work? And can you even define some of those things for us, just to help us sort of understand what the OD is that is potentially being developed here?
It's an interesting project that we recently started around democratizing systems change through an OD lens, and through amplifying indigenous knowledge systems, because every society has some predominant knowledge pillars or philosophies that inform how people operate, how people behave. And in an African context, across the African continent, the Ubuntu philosophy is a cornerstone concept. And looking at the principles of Ubuntu, you can see that it actually amplifies the missionary or fundamental values of organization development. But if you read literature in OD, you rarely find a lot of indigenous African practices and how they actually mirror OD. And there are researches that actually say Ubuntu or African practices, indigenous practices, are not favorable for OD. But when you look at the African indigenous knowledge systems, we value communal practice, we value social justice, we value ecological balance, we value all these fundamental values in OD. So we are now trying to bring these African indigenous knowledge systems and showcase how they support OD work, leveraging on the work by Kurt Lewin, because we believe Kurt Lewin's field theory is a cornerstone of OD. But when we look at field theory and we look at the Ubuntu philosophy and the many indigenous knowledge systems in Africa, you can actually see that we amplify the uniqueness of OD. And also, we are also leveraging on Eastern philosophy, Taoism and Confucianism, and say, if we bring these together and manifest the inclusive value of OD, we'll be able to enrich the field and practice of organization development. But what we have seen of late is that predominance of Western OD. And we are now using the term decolonizing OD, and allow me to put decolonizing in quote, because the whole idea of what we are doing there is to say, let's open up the conversations and embrace indigenous paradigms in different contexts, amplify them, and see how we can actually enrich the practice of OD. Africa has a rich oral tradition. Growing up, we would sit in a round hut and start sharing stories at night before sleeping. Everybody sits down and starts sharing stories, the folk tales and fairy tales. That's a rich oral tradition in Africa, which speaks to storytelling. But there is nowhere in a lot of OD literature where we amplify that African indigenous paradigms and how they inform OD. So I believe the effectiveness of OD should be customized to a specific context. We can't fit an organization or a context into an already prescribed model or philosophy. Hence, we are advocating for, let's embrace these indigenous epistemologies and enrich the practice of OD. And it's quite interesting what we are finding out in terms of how the indigenous African paradigms inform OD. And we are happy that in China, there's a lot of work around Eastern philosophy, Taoism and Confucianism, and how it's actually supporting OD work. There's a lot of research by Dr. Tang there, which we are actually leveraging on to make a case of African OD. So people would then say, are you defining a new OD when you say African OD? And I've said, no, we are not defining a new OD. We are just amplifying indigenous paradigms in Africa and how they support Kurt Lewin's field theory and all the theories that we have in OD.
It does demonstrate that even a profession that prides itself on its openness and inclusivity can have a real reality bias in terms of like looking for a predominant lens as well. I guess it also really reinforces the importance of OD practitioners or people that practice it to do it in an international context, because then you start to see the world through a lot of different lenses. I remember I worked extensively in China, and the way in which organizations and relationships are actually is just so different. And it just brings such a new way of thinking about organizations and how communication happens again. Is that something that you advocate in your students to get international experience and mix with other cultures?
Definitely. If you look at the structure of our certification program, it's made up of people from different contexts, mainly within Africa and some outside of Africa. And that enriches our conversations. And you see a lot of similarities in terms of how we should practice. And I'm glad that even the international organizations in OD, they are also pushing for that international perspective. I sit in the board of the International Society for OD and Change, and we really have a strong international affiliates where we meet. And just yesterday, we were on a board meeting to say we need to start webinars that speaks to these different contexts. I also work closely with the Organization Development Network, and our recent publication on the Organization Development Review was looking at the foundations of Kurt Lewin's theory and they reached out to say we need an African perspective to it. And last year, we also published leadership, and I brought in the African perspective to it. And the publication that is coming in China is also saying, let's bring Western philosophy, Eastern philosophy, and African indigenous paradigms together and see what emerges. So there is that movement from where I stand of internationalizing our practice and manifesting the value of inclusivity in OD by now embracing, especially the African indigenous paradigms. It's something that I'm really pushing, and I'm glad that we have a lot of colleagues who are also advocating for the same, to say we need to see indigenous paradigms in Africa in being taught at universities in the US, being taught at universities in China, just as we are teaching Western OD in our universities in Africa. And OD needs to manifest that. And that's where we are now bringing that whole issue of decolonizing the practice and manifesting fundamental values of OD, of which inclusivity is a key value to that. So yes, we continue to push for that international perspective, and it's really working. And we are glad that all the institutions in OD are pushing that narrative.
Great. And can I just ask one geek question, if that's okay? Because obviously, I think definition is really important. There are people that tune into us, and I think we're at 54 countries now, Danny, which is wonderful, but everyone is at different stages in their career. You talked about the fact that how it meets Kurt Lewin's fields theory. Could you just define a little bit about what you mean by Lewin's field theory, just to sort of help people understand what that is?
No, that's fine. Kurt Lewin's field theory is the cornerstone of OD. And I like the view that behavior is a function of the person and the environment as a key part of Kurt Lewin's theory. And we see that in the African continent with 54 countries in Africa, all different contexts. And I always give that illustration to the people I interact with on our mentorship program to say, if you take me out of Zimbabwe today and put me in Morocco, and visit me after 4 or 5 weeks, I'll be acting like somebody who was born and bred in Morocco. What has happened there? The environment has actually influenced my behavior. And the same is happening in organization. The way people behave, I always say, is a result of the environment that the organization is actually created and designed. So rather than changing a person's behavior through the carrot and stick method, as used to be done in the scientific management era, we need to change the environment. But we see most of our organizations, they try to force people to change their behavior. We have even our governments on the African continent. They try to change people's behavior without changing the environment in which people are living. And as such, we have a whole lot of issues on the African continent because leaders think the best way to lead people is to force them to change their behavior. They come up with policies, they come up with instruments that try to say, Justine, change your behavior. But the environment is not conducive. So we then look at it, and when we look at the African OD narrative and the Ubuntu philosophy, which then says, we are one. You are because I am because you are. So let's sit together, let's dialogue and see how best we can move forward as a collective. So that's where we really borrow from Kurt Lewin's field theory and how it is a cornerstone to OD at large. And now we are bringing in that Ubuntu perspective.
You're clearly a very mission-driven person. You're trying to create change in so many different ways. What was your journey into OD? How do you find yourself now? Like, how did you discover OD and how has that formed part of your journey?
It's quite interesting. I started my career as a banker in the banking sector. Let me not call myself a banker because I got a bachelor's degree. I got a bachelor's degree in banking and I started working in the bank. I wouldn't say I'm a banker. And I worked in the bank for about 8 years. And during that time, I was really an ambitious young man, wanted to sit with the CEO, write emails to the CEO. Can I have coffee with you? Can I come to your office? I would always love to talk to my managers, to my supervisors and my CEOs, not because I wanted a promotion, but just that desire to speak to people who are way ahead of me. And funny enough, the doors were not opening for the whole 8 years. I knocked on many doors of leaders just to say, let's have a conversation. I need to learn. I'm a young man working as a clerk in the bank, a treasury clerk in the bank. And to me, it was like, he's a nobody. What can we discuss with him? So seeing and experiencing that leadership led me to enroll for a leadership and management course at master's level. And I was still working in the bank. And the leadership and management program at master's level enlightened me of this new leadership consciousness that values people, this new leadership narrative that says people are at the center and you need to value even the least in your organization. And I started looking around and said, I need to actually be a PhD so that I will be able to sit with these people who call themselves CEOs and have a conversation with them. So my enrolling for a PhD at a very early age was to try and push and get into these boardrooms, sit with CEOs and start conversations and pushing this new leadership narrative. Then I enrolled for a PhD in governance and leadership with a focus on organization leadership and development. And that was a wow moment for me when I started doing research and reaching out to OD people. And I'm glad that most of the OD folks that I reached out to, renowned, distinguished people in OD, like Robert Marshak, David Jameson, Joan Preston, Roland Livingstone, Peter Sorensen, Teres Yeager, just by an email or a LinkedIn message, they would respond and they gave me an ear. So I started falling in love with OD people even more. And I always challenge the people I mentor to say, if you see someone who says organization development and is practicing real OD, send them a LinkedIn message and you are rest assured that in 2 weeks, they are going to schedule a meeting with you. And to date, we have really gotten that positive response. So that led me to love OD people, to love the field of OD, and to start interacting more with OD work. And now creating the space to be where leaders are and invite them to this new leadership consciousness that values people, that is human-centered, and as such, manifest the value that we want to see. So it was my lived experiences that attracted me to the field and practice of OD. And that's why I work 24/7 in OD, creating space, opening doors for people. And I don't know how many Zoom calls I can facilitate on a day, different people. And because I used not to get that opportunity when I was reaching out to people I looked up to, they would close their doors. So when I try to close someone's door, I feel like I'm missing out at an opportunity and growing somebody who really need my help. So thumbs up to OD folks. A lot have supported our program to date. A lot of guest lectures from people from all over the world, and quite a number are willing to continue to support our programs. I think we are growing because of the support and the manifestation of OD values by the people in OD.
Yeah, I think you've hit on something. The OD community is very generous with its time and wanting to share its knowledge and its experience with other members and people within the community and not. So you're president of the Organization Leadership and Development Network. So what do you really value most about those types of networks and those communities?
Yeah, for me, we then established what we call generative dialogues on the Organization Leadership and Development Networks, which is a platform for knowledge exchange and sharing of experiences. And that's one thing that we're really benefiting from these international networks and the people who even attend our international conferences, the sharing of experiences, exchanging notes, and just having that space where people talk and share openly without fear or favor. So I enjoy these international conferences. I enjoy these networks because of that supportive role in terms of knowledge exchange, research collaborations. I think I've collaborated with a number of guys from these networks, Cheryl Young. We worked on another project from the OD network, Patrick Trotia in Canada, David Jameson. And all this is as a result of these networks. So we see these networks as tools or platforms, rather, to amplify our work, research, and exchange meaningful ideas around what needs to be done. So on the first day of our certification program, I always share with colleagues on the program all the international networks that I know of. And some of them I have not even spoke to, those in the Philippines, in Malaysia. I just know that there's a Malaysia OD network, Sagawa Institute in Malaysia. I just tell people to reach out, learn what they are doing, see what they are doing. So, and I think I've written to quite a number of these other communities and collaborated with them in a lot of initiatives. I'm actually an advocate for OD institutions.
So there's so many facets to the work that you do. What do you enjoy most? What brings you real joy?
It's that generosity and the availability of OD practitioners to support and to amplify the field, because every profession requires that attention. So if you are in a profession where people are really doing a lot of work, research and amplifying the work, it shows that there's a future of that profession. And that's what we see if you look at all the OD conferences that are happening. There are 2 that are happening this month. It's all about sustaining the future of OD and amplifying the future of OD. And to me, that gives me comfort to say I'm in the right place because we are going somewhere with this field. It's not just a field which I'm there for the money, but actually for the transformation that emerges out of it. So OD is a practice profession. That's number 2. A practice profession centered on manifesting real value and real transformation in people's lives. So when we are designing interventions, we are working with clients, our eyes are on the real transformation and sustainable regeneration as well. So that to me is something that is so interesting, because I always have stories to share about the interventions work that we are doing and the transformation that is happening in people's lives. And you get into OD communities, you hear a lot of those stories and case studies, which really is a plus to me.
I guess one thing I'm sort of fascinated, because one of the many roles that you do, you're a supervisor at a university for people doing their different theses and their dissertations and whatnot. And part of this podcast is about inspiring the next generation. What kind of emerging trends are you sort of seeing in terms of what people's research is looking at? You know, are there sort of particular tools or subjects that, or is it's just a very broad kind of range of things that you're seeing people come through in terms of what's taken their research interest?
Yeah, of late, speaking of the current work that I'm doing with students that I'm supervising, we are working on innovation and design thinking. And I think it's a hype on this part of the world, issues around design thinking and embracing that modality, that methodology in strategic planning, in organization transformation. And in Zimbabwe, we are pushing the industrialization agenda. And the question is, how do we really foster that industrialization using some of these tools and methodologies? There is also a lot of interest around foresight tools, based on the understanding that we are operating in a very dynamic environment. And the question I'm always asked is, how can we plan for 5 years from now? And then we see a lot of postgraduate students working on foresight tools. And what foresight tools can we use for speculative scanning to come up with 20-year strategic plans as a way of really dealing with this deep uncertainty that we are living in. And I have a colleague who is also working on purpose-driven organizations. And in this part of the world, there has been an overemphasis on profit-making organizations, so much such that organizations can actually manipulate the market, abuse their positions in the market. And now we are saying a lot of our organizations on the African continent, they are not existing for more than 100 years. 10, 20, 30 years, the organization collapses. And now we are seeing a lot of interest around purpose-driven organizations. And with a bias to the work that I'm doing, is the issue around human-centered leadership. and how do we really manifest that humanistic approach in leadership? Because I think if you read around leadership on the African continent, there is so much of pushing the self-ambition, this selfish kind of leadership, corruption in the African continent, and a lot of these issues that are happening when it comes to our leadership. So interest is there now to say, how do we cultivate human-centered leadership in spite of having a lot, organizations are spending millions and billions of dollars on leadership programs, but we don't see the leaders actually. And I have a colleague, Patrick, who always asks, where are the leaders? And as much as we are spending all this money on leadership, we don't see them. So a new narrative around leadership development. So the universities I work with, mainly, they push leadership governance programs. And those are some of the areas that the emerging scholars are really looking into.
We've got a bonus question for you. You can opt in or opt out of this question. You talked about tools there and foresight tools. Do you have like a favorite tool or technique that you just really find works for you or can work in a range of different circumstances?
I would say through co-creation, we get a lot of foresight because we are bringing different perspectives, divergent, convergent perspectives to an issue. So without going to theoretical tools, I will leverage more on co-creation. And Theory U by Otto Scharmer will then come in handy if we really want to dream big, if we want to lead from that emerging future. So I would go for co-creation. Let's sit down, let's brainstorm, let's have meaningful generative dialogue. Where do we want to go? How can we get there? Then I like a lot from the Futures School. They have what they call the natural foresight tool, which brings in issues around scenario planning, backcasting, design thinking, and strategic foresight. It's an interesting read, and I use a lot of their content when it comes to these foresight methodologies and tools. So co-creation, strategic foresight, leveraging on that natural foresight tool from the Futures School, I think would helps a lot. And I was teaching that to postgraduate students a few weeks ago.
Whenever we have asked that question, a lot of our listeners are pens poised going, what's really good out there? That sounds like a fascinating field. And Otto Scharmer's done some great work as well. On the flip side of Danny's question, what do you find most challenging about your work?
The most challenging about our work as OrgDev practitioners is, I would say, that process of reframing people's mindsets to appreciate the uniqueness and value of an OrgDev process. Why? Because people want to hold on to what they know, and getting people to rewire and reframe and reform their mindsets, it's a challenge. And I think it comes also from the perspective that people want to deal with the people that they know. And here comes a Justine who is coming with an OrgDev process, which people don't really appreciate. They kind of park you somewhere. So we are really struggling, but winning in huge ways when it comes to reframing leadership mindsets and heart sets to appreciate the values and the uniqueness of an OrgDev process. And where we win people's hearts, we have managed to get massive wins in terms of the implementation of the interventions and manifesting the value that is required. So for me, it's all about reframing. That's the greatest challenge.
And it is so hard, isn't it? Because, often these are people that can be quite mature in their career. Everything around them tells them that they're successful. They have a big salary and the rewards and trimmings that come with it. They have the position, and maybe the flow of information is to date has not necessarily shone a light on maybe that their practices aren't as good as they can be. And all of a sudden, like the OD mindset's going, well, actually, do you know this way that you're doing it is actually, it's not working. That is a real challenge, isn't it? What are some of the ways you get that message through?
Yeah, it's that ego to eco perspective shift. And in Africa, I think it's more pronounced. I've worked with also colleagues in the Middle East and the Western world. But the shift from ego to eco is a challenge. And that's, to me, is a true test of leadership. If a leader can actually embrace that ecosystemic perspective, do away with their egos. You go into organizations and you see these leaders with shiny shoes, pinstriped suits, expensive perfumes, and they want to be treated like mini gods, and everybody else is not a human being. So, and we call those people leaders in most contexts. But to me, that shift from the egoistic tendencies and orientations to an ecosystemic perspective is a true test of leadership. And we have a few of such leaders. And for those who practice real OD, it's a test of amplifying and living the fundamental OD values. If you can actually facilitate that shift. So it's a challenge. And I think a lot of leadership models, emerging leadership models, are really trying to address that. But it's proving to be a real challenge to shift leaders' mindsets from egoistic orientations to an ecosystemic perspective.
And what would you say are the key attributes of an effective OD practitioner?
Key attributes of an OD practitioner, I would go to I will use the pillars of OD to define that. Number one is someone who really prides in action research and action inquiry, immersing yourself in a client context or in a systems context, and eventually co-creating interventions with them. Number two, someone who prides in behavioral science knowledge, understanding human dynamics, and making decisions based on that understanding of human dynamics. We also look at someone who is good at whole system thinking, who prides in whole systems thinking, creates the space for whole system thinking. And when you have that attribute, it means you are bringing everybody to the table. You value all the stakeholders or the constituencies in a system, and also prides in organizational learning, ensuring that the organizations or the systems are fully developed such that the system is actually talking to itself about itself, and hence it can self-renew. So if someone has that capacity to create a space where organizations learn and self-renew and become fully developed, then I would say that person has those attributes. And in a nutshell, this is a person who is capable of creating safe spaces for people to engage in meaningful dialogue and co-create. Forget about the certificates, forget about your OD titles and post-nominals. Anyone, even a community leader, who has the capacity to sit people down, discuss, dialogue, and agree on regenerative interventions, that's an amazing OD practitioner. Why I say so is because we have a lot of these so-called OD practitioners who have certificates, PhDs, and all these certifications that you can get, but are not living and manifesting OD value. Yet, we have people who have never, I think it's from Susan Zaudiva, who have never attended an OD course, who don't even know about our terminologies in OD, but are actually amazing OD practitioners. And I've interacted with quite a number of them, and I wish they could actually teach OD programs at some of our top universities in the world. But they don't have the certificates, they don't have the names, they don't have the vocabulary of OD. So anyone who can actually bring people together, dialogue meaningfully, co-create interventions that support everyone in the system and develops the system to be at optimal performance is an OD practitioner to me.
If you look back at your career, what are some of the most important lessons you've learned from the work that you've done that you'd share with others? Important
lessons in my career. Number one is embrace the journey and see the bigger picture, no matter where you are at any given point in time. And I highlight that because at one point in my career, it was like, I'm not going anywhere. But that courage to then embrace the journey, embrace the challenges, the resistant forces, and the dreaming of an ideal future is very critical. Number two is the power of networking and creating a strong social system to lean on. And it stamps up to a lot of institutions, organizations globally. who have actually opened their doors to me as an individual and supported the work that we are doing. And thumbs up to you as well for inviting me on this podcast. It's part of the journey. So embracing and creating strong networks, support system. And number 3 is the need for consistency in the work that you do. Just like you started this OrgDev podcast, you might have dropped it 3 months after starting it. I was not supposed to be here if that had happened. But consistency builds courage, and it gives you that thought to continue moving and to see things from a different perspective. That's why, as you visit my LinkedIn profiles, it's been like that since around 2014, and my social media pages. It's that consistency that has helped me to build this profile, and actually the accountability to do things right, and the networks also reinforcing that. So that consistency is key. Bringing your family to the work that you do is the last thing that I've really learned, and that has really helped me. My wife is an OD practitioner. My kids are OD practitioners. Everybody who lives with me is an OD practitioner. So I think that has become a very supportive system where they know that all this Justine does is OD, and we just have to support. So the family support has been amazing, even during the down times of my career. That family support, the spousal support, has been really amazing, and it's something that we really need to cherish, and I cherish greatly.
So important, isn't it? And obviously there's lots of books on the shelf behind you, and you are steeped in academia, and you are a trainer of others. How do you invest in your own learning development? What does it look like for you?
I engage with a lot of institutions where I sit and learn in terms of professional development. So there are institutions which offers short programs, particularly around consulting processes, training and development, learning and development in that area, because that's where my strength is. So whenever I get an opportunity for these short programs, I sit in, I learn. And also attending these conferences. Yes, we organize conferences, but I also attend some conferences even outside of the work that we do in OD. And that has been very critical. Peer learning has been very amazing to the work that I do. I sit with a lot of mentors. I would make mention of Patrick Trotier, because we would meet every Wednesday for 2 hours for about 3 years. And we've missed maybe 5 or 6 Wednesdays in 2-3 years. And every Wednesday we'll just sit and discuss OD and his practice, because of his 41 plus years experience. Just being under his mentorship has really been amazing. And this whole connection with OD distinguished scholars and practitioners provides that mentorship for me. And most importantly, it gives me a sense of accountability to do more in the field, and to actually live and manifest OD values everywhere I find myself. So mentors have been a great help, some short programs that I attend, and also the peer learning from the colleagues that I interact with.
What advice would you give to someone who's considering a career in OD or organization development?
Oh, I will be biased I will be biased of that question, being an OD practitioner. But OD is a noble profession. It's a profession that actually changes you as an individual, and a profession that facilitates real transformative change, because it's a practice profession. And if you are committed to the profession, it really remodels you, and ensures that you relate with people, you love people, you value relationships. And I think relationship is currency. And when you have these relationships that builds and sustains you, you are better off. So to anyone who wishes to join OD, I would say OD is a noble profession. It's a spiritual profession as well, probably because of its connection to elevating humanity. And of late, I've really started reflecting on how spiritual the practice of OD is. And it's really a spiritual profession that is transformative and that facilitates real regeneration.
Justin, we want to say a huge thank you. We said pioneering and prolific. I think we probably should have added the word powerhouse as well, because you've just articulated so many concepts, and it's been a bit of a richness in terms of where do we go with our questions. And, you know, even when we took a slight detour and talked about Lewin's field theory, you just gave such a brilliant account of it as well. We've really enjoyed it. Danny, what are some of the things that you're going to take away from this?
Yeah, it's been I've really enjoyed the conversation. It's been beautiful. So I think I was struck by what you said about the beginning about OD consultants remembering they're not the change agents. They're not there to come up with solutions. It's about co-creation with our organizations that we're working with. I love what you said about the importance of customizing OD to the specific contexts that it finds itself in. And I think also the reinforcing the importance of that capacity of OD practitioners to create safe spaces and really bring people together, and see that as a core skill.
Really hard to come up with three. So I've got three. So I think, like, first and foremost is the potential intrinsic biases of OD. So being aware of them and just being aware of the importance of looking at other countries and other cultures and how and what they bring, and actually it brings so much more richness and complementarity as well. And the fact that, you know, a lot of things that OD said is brand new after 70 years has been around. I now think that OD is an African practice that just happened to get badged up as OD. So you talked about the power of co-creation, you know, wherever you are, whoever you do it, making sure that that sort of shared sense of ownership and how you do it too. And also finally, just the really empowering piece is that you don't need to be a PhD, although it helps, but you know, whether you're a community leader, wherever you are, just that ability to create a space and the ability for people to have dialogue really matters. And that's the most pivotal element of OD. So it's been wonderful. I hope everyone who's watching this has got as much value from it as we have. I hope it will be a miss, Danny. Justin, we'd love to have you back on at some point if you'd be happy to be on here again, if that's okay.
That's perfectly fine. Thank you so much for having me on this. I enjoyed it. I love it.
Join our wonderful portfolio of other distinguished OD practitioners from around the world, and you're a very worthy addition to it as well. If you are watching this on YouTube and you've enjoyed it, we'd love it if you hit the like button, and also if you subscribe. We do put these podcast interviews out with brilliant guests like Dr. Justine every single week. So subscribe to the channel. And if you listen to audio, it's available on Apple and Spotify and Amazon and all those wonderful things as well. And please feel free to like and comment, and the algorithm gods love it. And that means that even more people can spread out and hear the word of this as well. So thank you again. And I just want to say a huge thank you to you, Justin. It's been really intensely brilliant. We've loved the conversation. You've really expanded our thinking, which is exactly what we set out to do. So thank you so much.